the move, what was our focus on here? We're going from the third to the fourth is our point of focus. Let me double check that. Third to the fourth, yeah, that's our point of focus here. Okay, so that's going to be our major shift from the third to the fourth, going to the F. So the third is the E, and then which is also, you can call the Phrygian, to the F, which is going to be the Lydian. And that's going to be a half step. So we have a half step that we're moving. We're at the bottom of the house. So that half step, the half steps are important because there's less half steps than the whole steps. So if we identify where the half steps are, then it's more easy to define the whole system that way, right? Because the two half steps are the less common steps. So the two half steps are always going to be between the Phrygian and the Lydian. So even if I went to like the Dorian mode, when I go from Phrygian to Lydian, in an absolute modal standpoint, that's where the half step is. So we're going to say, okay, that's where one of the half steps are, at least. All right, so that's going to be the general idea on the half steps. Let's try to think of it from different perspectives, from the perspective of going, this way. We're going to say it could be thought of as the relative position 3 of the Ionian or major scale, which is Phrygian mode, to relative position 4 of the Ionian or major scale, which would be the Lydian. So we're going from 3 to 4, and that's going to be a half step. We can also think of it as just modes, absolute mode number 3 to absolute mode number 4, Phrygian to Lydian, which is going to be a half step. What if I thought about it from this E perspective? That E is the Phrygian mode. So if I was thinking of myself in Phrygian, building a chord that is based on the Phrygian with these notes in the Phrygian, for example, then that E would be adjusted to position number 1. We would readjust our focal point. How could I do that? Well, if I see it as absolute mode number 3, and I need to get it to 1, seeing it as the root, I could say, well, that means I have to subtract 2. So 3 minus 2 would be 1. And then I'm going to 4. If I subtract 2 on this one, I have to subtract 2 on this one. 4 minus 2 is 2, right? So I would be going from the first of the Phrygian to the second of the Phrygian. So let me just double check that. If I go down to the Phrygian, we make the E the first. Now we've got absolute mode number 3. Phrygian is now relative position number 1, going to relative position number 2, which is what I would call absolute number 4, mode number 4, the Lydian. So we still end up with the same half step, but now that E is thought of as the root, the tonic. That's going to be the idea. And then of course, that's going to be what we can think of it from. All right. So now let's go ahead and follow that around on each string. So let's say, so now I'm going to go, if I was going to play the scale, I would be going, if I'm staying in the same shape, it would be C, D, E, right? And then I'm going to continue on this string all the way out instead of staying in the same shape after I hit that point. So I'd be going from C, D, E, right? Whoops, wait a sec. It would be C, D, E. So now I'm going to be here on this E, and now I'm going to move up on just this shape. So then the focal point that we have is from the E to the F. That's our major step that we're kind of working on, and that's going from the fifth. That's going from the third to the fourth. So third to the fourth is our point of focus. So it's going to be here. I'm measuring. It would be a half step going from the third to the fourth. So we went from the third to the fourth. So we're here. And then we're going to go from the fourth to the fifth. I'm going to continue it out this way. So now we're going to go from the fourth to the fifth. And that would be going from the Lydian to the Mixolydian. From the fourth to the fifth is going to be a whole step. And then we're going to go from the fifth to the sixth, which is going to be a whole step, fifth to the sixth. And it's going to be a whole step here, fifth to the sixth. So we're going to go 5 to 6. That's going from G to A, or in other words, it's going from the Mixolydian to the Aeolian. The Mixolydian and the Aeolian, once again, being the meat of the hamburger. You can see it's repeating over here. And now I'm on the 12th fret, so I'm going to bring this back on over to this A in open position, open A. And now we're going to go from the 6 to the 7. So 6 to the 7 is a whole step. 6 to 7 is a whole step, going from here to here. So I'm going to go boom, boom, to, whoop, wait a sec. Yeah, that's right. To the B is the Locrian. So you can see it's still in the house. It's in the attic of the house, just like it was over here. And then we're going to go from the 7 to the 8 or 1, which is going to bring me back home. Boom, 7 to the 8 or 1 brings us back to the tonic. So we're going to say, so there's the C tonic. And you can see the C here is in the top of the house again. It's C's house, looking towards the ocean. Same shape that we have over here. And then we're going to go to continue, I'm going to get back to that E. So now we're on the first. We're going from the first to the second. First to the second. First to the second brings us to a whole step to from Ionian to Dorian, which is that D. So now we're on the Dorian, which is a minor mode. So it lives in what I call the double stop with the A on top of it, which is the Aeolian. And then we're going to go from the second to the third, which is a whole step. Second to the third brings us back basically to where we started, second to the third. And that brings us to the Phrygian, and then the Phrygian to the Lydian brings us back to where we started from. Whew. Okay, let's see if we can do this a little bit more succinctly here. So let's say that we're going, now I want to go from this step, from the third to the fourth, but I want to go back up to the top string. So I'm going to walk it through a first, second to the third, and then on the third, I'm going to look for the next step to be back up top, which is going to be up here, right? Which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets back. It might be easier to reach 6 frets forward. So it's going to be 6, which will be across the line 13. So I kind of cheated a little bit, but it's easier to reach forward. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So now I could say, okay, if I wanted, instead of going down this same shape, I could say this is the 1, 2, 3, and then I want to find a half step. And let's imagine I'm going to go back up to the top string, and then I'm going to count it from that top string again. So now I'm going to say, okay, if I was here, I'd say this is going to be 1, the C to the 2, to the 3, whole step to the 3, and then instead of half step to the 4 here, I'm going to move it up to this F up here. So just to see where I can break this formula up each spot if I know it's a half step. Now, how do I know that's a half step away? I can count it out because it needs to be a distance of 2 notes away. I'm not trying to think about octaves. It's 2 notes away. So that would be 5 here. -5, I would call it 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. This is the octave. And then it's going to be what I would say 12. You can also call it 12. Going around the horn, -1 is 11. Now, when I go above it, the distance has to be the inverse. So I'm looking for a distance of 1 note away, 1 note away to get to here. And the inverse distance is 12 minus 1, which would be 11. So if I'm looking for a distance of 11, which would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, or octave, and then 12 minus 1 is a distance of 11. So in other words, if I went from this F to this E, that would be an interval of an 11 note away, which would be a major 7 from the perspective of the E. but from the perspective of the, from the perspective of the F, but from the perspective of the E, bottom to top, it would be a one note away, which would be, you can call it a minor second or a half step. It's a half step away. Now I can see that F right there is the 13 is also over here. It'd be, the 6 frets back the other way, so we're in our shape. And so now we went from, once again, the to the F. So now we're going to go from the 4 to the 5. So now we're on this F over here, and we're going to say, okay, so now we're going to go from the 4 to the 5. It's going to be a whole step. So it's going to be going from the F to the G. So F to the G. And so do to do, which is also, we can call the Lydian to the Mixolydian. The G's hanging out in the 2 note per string hamburger shape. And then we're going from the 5th to the 6th. So now I'm going to say, okay, now we're going from the 5th to the 6th, which is like saying we're going from Mixolydian to Aeolian. The Aeolian doesn't always mean it's an A note, by the way. It just happens to be Aeolian, starts with an A. It's a whole step. And then we're going from the 6, from the 6 to the 7 is a whole step. 6 to the 7 is going to be a whole step. 6 to the 7 is going to be a whole step. Wait a sec. 6 to the 7, yeah, is a whole step. And that's going to be then B, or the A, which is an Aeolian, to the B, which is the Locrian. And then the 7 back home is going to be a half step. 7 to 1 or 8 is going to be a half step, which brings us around the circle back to the Ionian or the major scale. Okay,